Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called I Will Raise My Child as Another Man's. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! The story begins with two noblemen asking the king for Hinael's hand in marriage. One of them is Count Phil, an esteemed lord known to have loved Hinael for a long time. The other is Prince Lutz Viant, a prince from the victorious Trikas Empire. Apparently, the emperor promised to give him one of his daughters as a peace offering for the war reparations. Everyone wonders who the emperor will choose to give Hinael to, but Hinael already knows the answer. How? Because Hinael has lived through these events before. In her past life, a heavily pregnant Hinael is traveling across the snowy mountains when one of her husband's subordinates asks her to step out for a moment as they fix the carriage. But as soon as she steps out, she is dragged to a nearby cliff. Immediately, Hinael begins fearing for her life, but when she sees her husband emerging from the shadows, she's relieved, thinking he's come to save her. That is, until he pushes her off the cliff with the intention of killing her and their child. What a scumbag! Just wait till I find out who this husband is! In an odd turn of events, Hinael wakes up in her bedroom, completely alright. Apparently, she's returned to the past, 2 years before the events leading to her death. As fate would have it, it's also around the same time when Prince Lutz would be coming to take his bride. Hinael thinks back to Prince Lutz. Although he's a ruthless war hero of the Trikas Empire, it's rumored he has little to no power since he isn't heir to the throne. But Hinael knows better because in her past life, Lutz had ultimately become the emperor, ruling Trikas with the Princess of Saleh. While she, Hinael, would die by the hands of her husband Count Heir, who got rid of her to be with his mistress. I knew I felt something off about Heir. With this, Hinael is determined to change her fates. Hinael's mother was once a maid at the palace who caught the king's eye. After she bore him a child, she became one of the 5 concubines of the king. At present, Hinael enjoys tea with her mother, who talks fondly about Count Heir. Hinael, however, only frowns in response as she remembers the Count's cruelty in her past life. She'll do everything she can to avoid him, which means she needs to ensure that she becomes Prince Lutz's bride. But the question is, how? Suddenly, she remembers an incident where Prince Lutz murders someone from the palace. If she remembers correctly, that would happen tomorrow. That night, Hinael confronts the commander of the Imperial Guard, persuading him to give up something currently in his possession, the almoner belonging to Prince Lutz. Hearing this, the commander is appalled, claiming that she's making baseless accusations. But after Hinael promises not to rat him out, he concedes. Beading with sweat, he gives up the almoner, hoping that she stays true to her word. Back in her room, Hinael stares at the almoner, deeming it as the key to securing a proposal from the prince. But suddenly, she feels a blade pressed to her throat. It's Prince Lutz, and he thinks she's the thief. He charges right at her, quickly snatching the almoner and cutting Hinael in the process. Okay, but did anybody else notice how he looked like he was going berserk? I just know that almoner has some power over him. As he draws his sword, Hinael panics, begging him to hear her out. She explains that she intended to return it to him, fearing that if he found it within the hands of another, he'd kill them. She only wanted to protect her people. Prince Lutz laughs, amused at her excuse. He guesses that she's one of the illegitimate princesses born from the concubines. But despite her status, Hinael still pushes forward with her plan. Boldly, she asks him to choose her as his bride. Lighting a candelabra, Prince Lutz illuminates the room, seeing Hinael in her undergarments. One look at her, and he remarks that she needs to try better to win him over. Without warning, Hinael strips her clothes off, revealing her naked body and catching Lutz off guard. Admittedly, the prince is amused, but only momentarily. Girl, aren't you moving too fast? Throwing her his coat, he instead wants to know why she's so adamant on becoming his bride. Without delay, Hinael explains that she doesn't want to end up with a man who's been coveting her. She's in no position to refuse him unless the Prince of Trikas snatches her away first. Hearing this, the prince approaches her like a lion prowling towards his prey. He acknowledges Hinael's reasons, but still, he thinks she's being too reckless. She may be avoiding the man she hates, but becoming Lutz's bride is like walking into a lion's den. After all, he's a warhound, a killing machine, a beast who knows no mercy. His arms tighten around Hinael's neck, but she remains unfazed. Not gonna lie, I wouldn't mind that either. His traits hardly matter to her because all she asks from him is one thing, that she'll be the one to bear his child. Once more, Lutz is left amused by her. However, he doesn't give her an answer yet. Instead, he invites her to meet with him at the Western Palace tomorrow. The following day, Hinael prepares to meet Lutz, but she's intercepted by the queen and 2 of the king's concubines. To them, she's a vulgar woman for being so ambitious to lay eyes on the prince. Just then, Lutz's assistant, Evan Lenouve, arrives to escort Hinael to the prince, leaving the queen stunned with irritation. As Hinael meets with Lutz, he tells her that he has conditions of his own to match her proposal. If she's willing to accept them, he'll take her as his bride. First things first, Lutz wants to know why Hinael despises Sheter so much, but unfortunately, it's not something she can give him an answer to. Yeah, 'cause how are you gonna tell him Sheter killed you in your past life? Thankfully, he doesn't press the matter further. Instead, he tells Hinael about the reality of becoming his wife. If they are to marry, Hinael will become princess consort only in title with no real power. The same extends to their child. It'll be a child who'll never hold power. As for his terms, beyond siring an heir, he wants Hinael to expect nothing from him. No affection, no needless intimacy, nothing. Surprisingly, Hinael is quick to accept, which leaves Lutz promising that he'll propose to her tomorrow. The following day, Dea dresses up Hinael so beautifully, adorning Hinael with her mother's jewelry. Her entire look is breathtaking, even attracting jealous spirits like her sister Princess Sayla, the king's legitimate daughter. Sayla, along with the other princesses, mocks Hinael for no reason. Luckily, they leave shortly after, but it's not entirely a relief to Hinael because the next person to approach her is Sheter. Ever the flirt, he begins making advances towards Hinael. However, when he spots a scar on her hand, he goes ballistic. Ugh, as if you have the right to be mad about what happens to her body? He's about to kiss her hand all better, but Hinael yanks her hand from his hold. Suddenly, the crowd erupts into whispers as Lutz makes an entrance. But they all stare in disbelief when he approaches Hinael, acting all familiar. Endearingly, Lutz plants a gentle kiss on her hand, invoking Sheter's fury as he yanks Hinael's hand away. He lectures Lutz about proper etiquette, but Lutz is having none of his hypocrisy. People from Saleh shouldn't be allowed to talk about etiquette when they wage war on other empires without warning. Suddenly, the king and queen make their entrance. Seeing the 2 men at odds, the king can only wonder what prompted their hostility towards each other. Before the king, both Sheter and Lutz announce their desire to claim Hinael as their bride. Hearing this, the king ponders the matter carefully. After all, going against Lutz's choice might spark a conflict between Saleh and Trikas. Yet before a verdict is made, Lutz brings up a matter of concern to the king. In front of everyone, he narrates Sheter's earlier disrespect towards him, earning the king's wrath. Angered, the king commands Sheter to apologize immediately, but Sheter seethes with fury. Put in a tight spot, he apologizes insincerely, wishing for Lutz to enjoy the rest of the night. Lutz, ever the opportunist, takes this as a chance to claim Hinael. Pulling her close, he declares a willingness to overlook this misunderstanding if Hinael is made his bride. Suddenly, whispers die down when the king finally announces his decision. He's granting Lutz's request. Take that, Sheter! You're really no match for Lutz! As for Sheter, he is to choose a bride among the remaining princesses as consolation. He's visibly infuriated by the events, but he's left with no choice. Reluctantly, he points to a princess that leaves Hinael shocked. The princess he's chosen is Mie, who happens to be Lutz's wife in Hinael's past life. Oh, what an interesting turn of events! Outside, Lutz asks Hinael if something's wrong, to which she just chalks up to feeling relieved over not having to marry Sheter. Knowing this, Lutz eases, lounging on the bench beside Hinael's. From afar, Hinael sees a pregnant woman with her husband closely attending to her. Without her noticing, tears stream down her eyes as she remembers her unborn child. Once again, Lutz is alarmed to see Hinael emotional. This time, her excuse is that she remembers her mother's struggles. In hushed tones, she tells him of her mother's situation, how the king ordered her to his chambers in his drunken state, bearing Hinael as a result. Hearing this, Lutz finally understands why Hinael is labeled as a half-blood princess. He clicks his tongue in disapproval, not at Hinael being a half-blood, but at the king's disrespect towards Hinael's mother. We love a man who supports women. This surprises her and makes her see Lutz in a new light. Back inside, Hinael congratulates Mie on her proposal. It isn't out of spite, but rather she genuinely wishes her well. Mie, however, apologizes to Hinael. She feels bad for ending up with Sheter since he and Hinael were originally the rumored couple. But honestly, it's been one of Mie's longest dreams to marry someone like the famous Count Sheter. Hinael, trust me, you really don't want him. And speaking of Sheiter, he also wishes to speak with Hinael, preferably in private. Alone together, Hinael wishes Sheiter well on his marriage, but Sheiter has no plans to give up on her as he claims her as his own. Jeez, this guy doesn't take no for an answer, huh? His obsession frightens and disgusts Hinael, prompting her to walk out on him. But just as she does, she runs into Lutz. At first, he wonders why she looks so tense and in a hurry, but when he sees who's behind her, he quickly catches on. He can only smirk at how persistent of a jerk Sheiter is. He thinks it's time to put him in his place. Not by force. Yet. Walking up to the king, Lutz suggests for the newly betrothed couples to dance, and the king finds this a spectacular idea. The dance will mark the unity between Saleh and Trikas, leaving Sheiter with no choice but to participate. On the dance floor, Lutz shows off, purposely holding Hinael close to make Sheiter jealous. His act is so convincing that even Hinael feels her heart racing. But as if that wasn't enough, he lifts her up into the air as they dance, making Hinael flustered. He sets her down right on top of his own feet, boosting her up so that their faces are closer together. He gazes at her eyes deeply and lovingly, and when everyone's attention is on them, including Sheiter's, Lutz crashes his lips onto Hinael's, kissing her passionately with the whole crowd as his witness. What? That was so unexpected! But look at them! They're perfect together! Days later, Lutz and Hinael's wedding is finally held. The ceremony begins in no time and everything goes smoothly. That is, until the high priest freezes in horror. He claims to sense dark magic emanating from Lutz. If such a thing is true, then the wedding cannot continue. From his pocket, Lutz secretly pulls out the almoner, gripping it so tightly that his fingers bleed. It's as if he's using the almoner to conceal something from within him. This marriage between him and Hinael was supposed to be a gesture of peace between Saleh and Trikas. For the high priest to pull a stunt like this, Lutz can only interpret it as Saleh wavering from the peace treaty. Unfortunately, the high priest pays him no mind. According to him, should Lutz harbor dark magic, a cloud of soot will form as soon as holy water comes into contact with him. In all his years serving Nushkar, he has never been wrong, and he's ready to prove it to everyone. Without hesitation, he douses Lutz with holy water, soaking him from head to toe. But to his dismay, nothing happens. He attempts a second purification, but the king stops him, clearly angered by his actions. Without delay, he orders the high priest to continue the wedding. That night, Lutz retreats to the West Palace, telling Evan that they must leave Saleh within the night. He's pissed at the high priest, but most of all, he's amused that someone has caught on to his true nature. Oh, now I'm even more curious about this secret of his. This makes Evan panic, though. They can't afford to leak Lutz's secret, especially since this concerns the royal family of Trikas. Lutz is still adamant they leave right away, but before he could continue his conversation with Evan, he passes out cold. I mean, he did strain himself trying to conceal his energy with the almoner. The following morning, Hinael meets with her mother, informing her that she would be departing Saleh immediately as per her husband's orders. Since Hinael's departure is inevitable, she offers her a parting gift, an elixir that is said to help women gain their husband's favor. Hinael is all too familiar with this elixir. In her past life, she used it to rekindle Sheiter's love for her, but apparently, it only grants favors of the flesh, leaving Hinael pregnant after Sheiter had his way with her. Shortly after, both of the king and Hinael's mother see her off, with Mie joining them a little while later. Unexpectedly, Hinael and Mie agree to keep in contact. With no more time to waste, they bid their goodbyes to Hinael, but then the king tells Hinael something that leaves her shocked. Lutz has already left Saleh last night. As they depart Saleh, Dea expresses her disdain towards Lutz for leaving Hinael behind. But truth be told, Hinael doesn't mind. To her, he's shown her enough kindness already. Meanwhile, Sheiter receives word about Hinael's departure. Upon learning that Lutz left before they could share a night together, Sheiter seems pleased that Hinael's innocence remains untaken. Oh my god, even I'm getting goosebumps fearing for Hinael. Sheiter speaks like he's ready to have his way with her. Mid-travel, a knock is heard by the carriage window. It's Evan, and he's come to brief Hinael on the day's events. He informs her of the route they're taking, noting that it's a long and tiring journey to get to Trikas. As he finishes, he also tells her about the reason behind Lutz's early departure. It turns out he had urgent matters to attend to. Evan, you cheeky little liar! Knowing this, Hinael feels at ease, and so does Dea. They really thought Lutz had left Saleh in anger after the wedding's insulting events. That night, they arrive at Viscount Dwayne's estate, but seeing how Hinael really wants to see Lutz already, Evan decides to pull her aside to talk privately. He reveals that Lutz has been poisoned, and it was likely his half-brother's doing considering their strained relationship. Going to such lengths just to cover up for Lutz? Now I'm really curious about his secret. This troubles Hinael, and although she wants to see him even more, she heeds Evan's advice to give him some space to rest alone. Even more challenging, though, is keeping all this from Dea, leaving Hinael to carry the burden alone. That night, Hinael sleeps alone in her room, but the cold pricks at her skin, disturbing her sleep. But just when she wakes, a masked man gags her and takes her away, kidnapping her from the Dwayne estate. Meanwhile, Lutz has just awakened after passing out for 2 days. But before Evan can catch him up on everything, Dea barges into the room, crying and screaming for help. In tears, she informs him that Hinael is missing. Evan manages to calm Dea, urging her to keep quiet about Hinael's situation. Meanwhile, Lutz offers to find Hinael personally, much to Evan's worry. The cherry on top? Lutz orders him to make an excuse for his and Hinael's absence, like how he's taking her on a romantic getaway or something. As for the culprit, Lutz can only think of 2 people, either his younger brother, the third prince, or Heir. Turning to leave, he orders Evan to quietly investigate on his own too. For some reason, Lutz has a strong inkling that his brother is behind this. After all, it's always been like that. Years ago, when Lutz's mother passed, a new empress immediately replaced her, bringing along other children of the emperor, one older than him and another younger. The older son took Lutz's rightful claim to the throne, while the younger one took everything else from him. As for Lutz, he was thrown into the front lines of battle while the emperor, the new empress, and his half-brothers played a happy family. Elsewhere, Hinael is being carried off to the north, right in the direction of the Trikas Empire. Could it be that Lutz's half-brother is behind her kidnapping? To her horror, she gets an answer to her musings right away. Her captor is none other than Heir. This man is an obsessive predator. Looking around, she realizes this scene is all too familiar. The snowy mountains, the cliff, Heir. This is the same place she was killed in the past. Afraid and desperate, Hinael risks it all, fleeing from Heir and his subordinate. Heir orders his subordinate to chase after Hinael, and she's caught in no time. However, she isn't left unscathed. Her body is covered in scratches. This angers Heir, and on the spot, he murders his subordinate. Seeing this unfold, Hinael is left shaken, especially when Heir dares to comfort her. He takes her to one of his villas nearby, expressing that they would be spending their days together there. Settling Hinael on the bed, he scrubs her clean, even daring to touch her under the pretense of warming her up. Hinael pulls away, appalled by his audacity. How could he dare to touch her when she's already Lutz's wife? Just like any other predator out there, Heir doesn't stop despite Hinael's discomfort. Heck, he even claims that this is what the Empire wanted. What the Empire wanted? I think these are hints that he's working with the third prince to bring down Lutz. Hinael continues to resist Heir's advances, but unexpectedly, he pins her down on the mattress and forces himself onto her. Meanwhile, in the forest, Lutz summons a falcon to take away the almoner from him. He beckons the falcon to return the almoner when the time is right, but for now, he's letting his beastly instincts take over. Without the almoner nearby, Lutz allows the darkness within him to take control. Immediately, his senses sharpen like an animal on the hunt. With his heightened senses, he scans the scene and manages to locate Hinael's ribbon. Back at the villa, Heir continues forcing himself onto Hinael. But putting up a fight against him is useless, so she decides to change her tactics. She leans into his touch, caressing his face. When she has him wrapped around her finger, she then manages to convince him that they shouldn't do it when she's still freezing cold. At this point, Heir is absolutely ensnared by Hinael. He heeds her words, apologizing for almost sullying their first night. Seeing how she's still freezing, he offers to draw her a warm bath, prompting him to leave the room for a while. He is so desperate to have her that he totally fell for that. Left alone, Hinael leaps into action, looking for an escape. The balcony a few stories above ground is her only way out, so she ties curtains and blankets together, forming a rope. She's about to climb down when Heir comes back into the room. Seeing her escape, he hurriedly chases after her, managing to haul her back inside before she can climb down. His blood boils as he realizes that he's been deceived, and he beats Hinael to a pulp in anger. Menacingly, he then threatens her life if she tries to escape again. Meanwhile, Lutz finally manages to track down Hinael's location, but he's also beginning to succumb to the darkness. Inside, Hinael is left alone as Heir rides back to the castle to fetch her some ointment. She doesn't dare try to escape again, fearing his wrath. But then someone tries to enter her room, leaving her to reach for a weapon in an instant. The door rustles as someone attempts to enter. Hinael draws her weapon, but when she sees that it's Lutz, she can't help but jump into his arms. A wave of relief washes over her as she holds him close, finally feeling safe. Oh, but Lutz is definitely failing to hide his blushing cheeks. Suddenly, he becomes concerned and alarmed when he notices Hinael's injured face. Heir clearly laid hands on her. He wraps her up in his cloak and carries her in his arms, determined to rescue her from this torment. Unfortunately, it just so happens that Heir has also returned. Seeing him take Hinael away, he immediately draws his sword, charging to attack Lutz. Lutz parries away quickly, shielding Hinael. He'll make sure to teach Heir a lesson. He takes Hinael to a safe room first, asking her not to come out as he deals with Heir. In the halls, the two face each other, and in quick movements, Lutz attacks. Heir is no match against him in close combat, and within seconds, he loses a finger. Lutz, however, is curious about who Heir is working with, but seeing that he's not willing to cooperate, Lutz shows him no mercy. Despite taking a few hits, Heir remains cocky. Apparently, he has backup guards stationed outside. But unbeknownst to him, Lutz had already killed them off earlier. Realizing that he's utterly alone and under Lutz's mercy, Heir finally cooperates, admitting that it's the third Prince Kyle who's behind everything. It's just as Lutz expected, but still he isn't satisfied. He lands one final punch on Heir's face, knocking him out cold. That's not even enough for what you did to Hinael, you crazed Heir! But behind him, Hinael watches in horror. To her relief, Lutz didn't kill Heir. After all, Heir's death would only antagonize Lutz before the public should word get around. Hand in hand, the two escape together, traversing the cold landscape. Lutz breaks the truth to Hinael that Heir was working with his brother, most likely trying to eliminate Lutz from being second in line to the throne of Trikas. Trying to lighten the mood, Lutz chuckles as he teases Hinael, recalling how ready she was to attack the intruder. Just then, Evan arrives with backup, albeit a little too late. To make up for it, they make haste to clean up the trace of corpses Lutz left behind. Seeing how there isn't a horse for Hinael, she's left to ride with Lutz until they can find her a mount. But to Lutz's surprise, she doesn't mind at all, because it turns out she doesn't know how to ride a horse in the first place. Hinael hangs on tight, but little does she know that Lutz is feeling other things. With his senses still heightened, Hinael being so touchy is stirring different kinds of reactions from him. Jeez, Lutz, just admit how much you're enjoying this. After a tiring journey, Evan finally manages to acquire a carriage for them both. Seeing Lutz drift off to sleep immediately, Hinael can only imagine how exhausted he must have been. Wanting him to feel comfortable, she motions to cover him with a blanket, but unexpectedly, Lutz stops her. What Hinael doesn't know, though, is that Lutz is doing his best to restrain himself from giving into his primal senses. But persistent as ever, Hinael tries again, reaching out to caress his hair. This time, Lutz grabs her arm, and only then does Hinael understand why he's being distant. Apparently, as Lutz grabs her arm, he fails to hide his pants from her view. The two are embarrassed, and Lutz quickly crosses his legs as Hinael turns away. My, things seem to be moving quickly for our lovebirds. The rest of the ride is spent in silence, but even Hinael feels unsettled. She speaks first, asking him how he managed to find her. Lutz admits that he found her ribbon, which he then used to track her down. She's about to continue their conversation when she notices Lutz breathing heavily. It then hits her. It's only been a day since he recovered, and now he's exhausted himself to save her. With his well-being in mind, she suggests to stop for a short rest, something that Lutz surprisingly agrees to. By nightfall, they stop at an inn where Lutz is shown to a room with the help of his men. His breathing becomes worse, and his fever shows no sign of going down. He dismisses everyone, including Hinael, but it would seem that she's hard to get rid of. Despite his behest, she stays with him, determined to care for him until his condition improves. But as she reaches out to touch him, unexpectedly, Lutz grabs her arm and manages to pin her down on the mattress. He towers over her timid form, breathing in labored breaths as he tries to calm himself. Doesn't she realize how much of an effect she has on him? Composing himself, he sends Hinael away one last time, unwilling to give in to his desires. But in a turn of events, Hinael hugs him from behind, expressing that she's willing to let him have her even in a rundown inn. She then closes the gap between them, kissing Lutz intently. Lutz does his best not to be tempted, but it's no use. Holding Hinael close, the two share passionate kisses that leave them breathless. All his life, Lutz had been at the mercy of his primal instincts brought by the darkness within him. But for some reason, Hinael manages to quiet the storms within him, making him feel at peace. Before they get down to business, we all know what kind of business, Hinael suggests that they freshen up first. What she doesn't expect, though, is that there are no partition screens available for their bathtub. Left with no choice, she offers to step out while Lutz bathes. Unexpectedly, Lutz asks that she help him while he bathes. This makes Hinael blush a deep red, earning her his teasing as he suggests they bathe together. Cheeky as ever, he mentions that it's part of her duties as his wife. At this point, Hinael is heavily flustered but still reluctant. Reluctant? Girl, weren't you the one who was bold enough to ask to bear his child? As she begins to undress, Lutz finds himself gawking. He's seen her body before, but he feels completely different now. Clenching his fists, he restrains himself, asking her to leave as he's changed his mind. To him, a royal marriage such as theirs shouldn't be consummated in just an inn. Hearing this breaks Hinael in all sorts of ways. If he acts like this, she doesn't know when he'll ever lay eyes on her again. To Lutz's surprise, Hinael persists, climbing into the tub with him. Anywhere is fine, so long as they consummate their marriage. Before him, she begins undressing, and when she finishes, she then takes his hand, leaning into it as she plants soft kisses. Her kisses become Lutz's final straw, making him give in entirely. His breath is hot against her skin, and Hinael notes how he kisses like a man starved. Her thoughts are cut short when Lutz pauses, asking that they move to the bed. He carries Hinael onto the bed with ease, and the rest of the night is history, drowned in passion and lovemaking. The morning after, Lutz notices the bruises all over Hinael's body. Did he inflict all those as he became too lost in passion? Funny enough, Hinael admits the truth. Only 2 of her bruises were caused by heir, but the rest? They're all Lutz's doing. He's become a beast, all right. A beast hungry for Hinael. Knowing this, Lutz feels a pang of guilt. Nevertheless, he encourages her to have breakfast first. Memories of their steamy night together flash in Lutz's mind. He never intended to lose himself completely last night. For a moment, he thinks that his separation from the almoner might have riled up his beastly senses. But looking back, what he felt last night was entirely different. Unlike the primal sensation brought by the darkness, his night with Hinael was nothing of the sort. He felt no urge to act like a beast and ravage another person. Instead, it was a feeling more delicate, as if only he and Hinael were the only things that existed in the world. As if he were on cloud 9. Looks like someone's realizing just how obsessed he is with his wife. Hinael, on the other hand, reflects on her own about their time together. The way people talk about Lutz, they always painted him out as a killing machine, a man so violent who knows nothing but bloodlust. That wasn't the case at all last night. Last night he was tender and delicate, and although he was clearly hungry for pleasure, his touches were gentle. Inside the carriage, Hinael is in discomfort and tired. Noticing this, Lutz then pulls her close, allowing her to lean onto him so she can rest comfortably. Later, the two arrive at Hokkawick, where Dea and Evan meet them. However, Evan comes bearing bad news. From his investigation, Evan confirms that it was, indeed, the third Prince Kyle who orchestrated Hinael's kidnapping. Unfortunately, Lutz can't do much about it. Revealing the entire ordeal would only prove how he was caught up in disputes while being sent as a peace envoy. If it were up to him, he'd end heir in an instant. Is it so bad that I actually want heir gone so early into the storyline? But those matters aside, Evan also worries for Hinael. For sure, she must have been traumatized by the abduction. Hearing this, Lutz reassures him that Hinael is fine. In fact, she was even braver than they originally thought. Before long, they finally arrive at Trikas. As Hinael is left with Dea inside the carriage, Lutz rides on horseback, his mind in shambles. Memories of their night still fail to leave his mind. For the life of him, he has no idea why he enjoyed her touch so much. Never in his life had he been held like how Hinael held him, with care, longing, and desire. In Trikas, no woman, even his own family, would dare to approach him, fearing that he'll ravage them like meat once the darkness takes control of him. Considering his long-standing history of being controlled by the darkness, Lutz just can't take any more chances. He fears that one day he'll succumb to it once again and end up tearing Hinael limb for limb. Nearing the Imperial Palace, Lutz dismisses Dea to be alone with Hinael. Inside the carriage, he briefs her that they need to put on a performance. Apparently, to cover up for their delay, he told the Imperial Palace that they were on their honeymoon. Hinael has no objections, but when Lutz speaks again, her heart breaks. He reminds her that everything is just an act, nothing more. I know he's trying to cause a rift between them to protect Hinael, but dang, I feel sad for our girl Hinael. From his seat, Lutz pulls out a veil for Hinael. It should do the trick in covering up her bruises and other things. Just then, he also pulls out a gift for Hinael. This guy is showing mixed signals. Hinael beholds herself to an exquisite jeweled necklace that leaves her speechless. When Hinael puts it on, Lutz gawks, blushing as he finds her stunning. But he snaps out of it, though, trying to keep his composure as they're about to present themselves to the Imperial Palace. Inside, a gathering of nobles is convened to welcome their return. Before the Emperor and Empress, Lutz presents Hinael as his wife. But her veiled appearance irritates the Empress, and she demands that Hinael remove her veil at once. Lutz only smirks, and just as the Empress wishes, he unveils Hinael, revealing her bruised skin from their night of passion. Seeing this, the Emperor laughs uncontrollably, permitting Hinael to don her veil, much to the Empress's dismay. Throughout the ceremony, both monarchs dig jabs at Hinael, showing her utmost disrespect. Having had enough, Lutz finally snaps, asking that they show her some respect and address her formally as a member of the imperial family. Unfortunately, his family proves to be more difficult than ever. In front of the entire ensemble, the Emperor reminds Lutz that their late arrival to Trikas in itself was disrespectful towards them. Instead of granting his request, the Emperor would rather have Lutz mind his own conduct. Ugh, I hate how Hinael has to suffer through monstrous in-laws. Beside Hinael, Lutz clutches his fist in fury, but he makes no more moves to object or retaliate. After all, longing for their love and approval was something that Lutz had abandoned a long time ago. Noticing his quiet wrath, Hinael reaches a hand towards him. Unexpectedly, he startles, yelling at Hinael. However, she remains composed, reminding him that they need to keep up their act. Later, as Hinael prepares for the welcoming banquet, she's stunned to see what Dea has prepared for her. The dress itself makes her hesitate, knowing too well that she'd be ridiculed. But with no other options, Hinael is left with no choice. Just as expected, everyone at the ballroom is dressed modestly. Luckily, she managed to bring a shawl to cover herself up. But just then, someone bumps into her, knocking off her shawl and spilling wine all over her. The culprit? Prince Kyle, the third prince of Trikas, and he wastes no time in humiliating Hinael in front of everyone for her bold choice of clothing. Oh, this man is a personification of rage bait. Instead of crumbling, Hinael straightens her back and calmly apologizes, explaining she had little time to learn Trikas' customs. She then greets Kyle and his wife, expressing her hopes to learn proper etiquette under their guidance. Everyone's attention quickly shifts to Kyle. Put in the hot seat, he stiffly offers her his well wishes, inwardly fuming. Clearly, Hinael isn't as naive as he assumed. A while later, Lutz finally arrives, but he's alarmed to see Hinael as the object of everyone's murmurs and judgment. He then covers her with his cloak, pulling her aside. Outside, he reprimands her for wearing such a dress to the banquet. Tears prick at Hinael's eyes as she explains the situation to Lutz, how she barely brought anything when they hurriedly left Saleh, and how she brought a shawl but was picked on by the third prince. Seeing her distraught, Lutz finds himself unable to remain angry. Exhaling a deep breath, he reassures Hinael that none of this is her fault. Instead, he should have been more mindful and attentive of her needs. His gaze softens, and he almost looks apologetic, as if he felt sorry that being his wife meant having to endure his family's torment. But Hinael doesn't pity herself, because as she knows, at the end of the day, Lutz will emerge victorious. The two head back inside, only to be confronted and ridiculed by the Empress herself. She doesn't hesitate calling out Hinael for wearing such a revealing dress. A standoff between the Empress and Lutz then ensues when the Empress refuses to show Hinael a little welcoming grace. It gets so heated that Lutz even calls out other nobles for their misdeeds of supporting factions that oppose the imperial family. His words stir the nobles into an uproar, leaving them to defend themselves as they explain their efforts of remedying their sins. Lutz remains unfazed, but the Emperor grits his teeth, angered by the scene Lutz caused. Not wanting to worsen the situation, he expresses he'll expedite Lutz and Hinael's wedding in Trikas. That way, Hinael can finally become an official member of the imperial family and take her place within the imperial court. As the Emperor and Empress leave, it's as if Hinael can finally breathe again. Turning to Lutz, she apologizes for causing him more inconvenience. But just as he said a while ago, he reminds her that nothing is her fault. Looking around, he then calls for Evan, summoning him to escort Hinael back into her room to rest, even though she obviously refuses to leave so soon. But just then, a man greets Hinael and introduces himself as Hinael Plake. Seeing him, Lutz immediately becomes protective of Hinael, insisting that Evan escort her out already. Although Lutz looks annoyed, his interaction with Hinael doesn't seem to be hostile. In fact, Hinael seems to be talking freely to a grumpy Lutz. Apparently, Hinael is the Chancellor of Trikas. Although he's a youngster, there's no denying that he's a clever fellow. Even Lutz is impressed by Hinael's wits and skills. Inside her room, Hinael is shortly joined by Lutz, who hugs her at first sight. In hushed tones, he expresses how much he hated that men kept ogling her during the banquet. The two share a passionate kiss, and things move quickly when Lutz carries her onto their bed. Flustered by how bold Lutz is, Hinael stops him while explaining that she still needs to take a shower. When Lutz offers that they shower together, Hinael quickly rejects him, pushing him out of the room since she knows that they'll do more than just shower. Afterwards, while Hinael is getting ready to take a bath, Dea is worried that Hinael and Lutz's relationship might be rocky, so she decides to help them by putting a potion in the tub that she has prepared for Hinael. Meanwhile, as soon as Lutz finishes, he quickly visits Hinael, who's still taking a bath. Starting to get impatient, Lutz intercepts the tea that Dea is about to bring to Hinael and uses this as an excuse to barge into Hinael's bathroom. Meanwhile, while Hinael is soaking in the bath, she begins to remember how kind Lutz is treating her so far and how he has also satisfied her womanly needs, making her blush while she's remembering it. But her thoughts are distracted when she hears the door open. Hinael then quickly gets up, thinking that it's Dea who's there to help her get ready for bed. But as she turns around, Hinael is shocked to see that it's Lutz who's now staring at her seductively. Seeing how hot Hinael is, Lutz quickly approaches her and kisses her, to Hinael's annoyance. Because of this, Hinael notices that Lutz's advances are more rough than in the past, causing her to panic and beg Lutz to be gentle. Meanwhile, Lutz is also trying to control himself, but he notices that it's more difficult than before because of Hinael's fragrance. Well, this is all the maid's fault! As Lutz starts to kiss Hinael more roughly, she begs him to bring her to bed since they might slip and get into an accident. After hearing Hinael's suggestion, Lutz swiftly carries her towards the room and upon arriving, throws her into bed. Next, Lutz continues his advances towards Hinael, while Hinael again tries to beg him to be gentle. However, sadly, Lutz is lost in the alluring scent of Hinael, which is intensified by the potion Dea mixed into her tub. Realizing that Lutz cannot be stopped, Hinael gives in to Lutz's desire. Feeling disappointed, Hinael then starts to remember that her primary purpose is only to give Lutz an heir and blames herself for forgetting. She thinks that Lutz is different from Heir, who in the past once cherished her, but in the end, is the one who wants to kill her and their unborn child. Helpless, Hinael closes her eyes, telling herself that everything will be alright as long as nothing happens to her and their child, and promises to shower all the love on the child once born. The following day, Lutz wakes up and tries to remember how rough he is towards Hinael, and questions himself about how he was having difficulty suppressing his desire. Lutz is then scared that Hinael will only see him as a terrifying and uncontrolled creature, so he plans to apologize to her, not wanting her to hate him. Afterwards, Lutz instructs the maid to prepare Hinael's favorite food for breakfast while Hinael is still sleeping peacefully. Later on, Hinael wakes up with an aching body. Lutz then quickly notices this and he hands her some water to drink. Hinael instantly notices how caring Lutz is, but she reminds herself not to get carried away since he might only be in a good mood. This misunderstanding was all caused by Dea. Why would she act without asking what that pink bottle potion was? When Lutz tries to apologize to Hinael about what happened last night, Hinael stops him mid-sentence and tells Lutz that she understands how he acted towards her, as it was also a result of Lutz's original request that she must never have feelings towards him, and that their main goal is to have an heir. After hearing Hinael's statement, Lutz is furious with himself, but tries to calm down since this is what he wanted from the very start of their relationship. Next, Hinael informs Lutz that from now on, she'll be ready to submit to him anytime he calls her, since she and Lutz both desire to have a child. Thus, Lutz agrees to Hinael's offer. Later on, a guard approaches Lutz and informs him that they have discovered a potion was used in Hinael's bathwater, which is considered an aphrodisiac for men and is a drug used by the royal family. The guard then asks Lutz if something had happened between them, since Hinael might be in trouble if it had, but Lutz quickly denies that anything had happened to Hinael. Knowing the report, Lutz is still shocked since he can't believe that Hinael would do such a thing and is desperate to seduce him, hence he decides to talk to her soon. Meanwhile, after Hinael shares with Dea what happened that night, Dea still can't believe Lutz's actions and informs Hinael she has already used up the pink potion, and it'll be expensive to buy a new one. Hinael then looks at Dea since she can't believe that she used up the potion without her consent, and realizes that Lutz's behavior last night might also be triggered by the potion that Dea placed in her bathtub. Next, Hinael proceeds to the dinner table, and upon arriving, she instantly sees Lutz patiently waiting for her. Please, I hope they can properly communicate already! After being seated in her seat, Lutz orders the maids to leave them alone in the dining room, which the servants quickly obey. Because of this, Hinael starts to think that Lutz might have an idea about the drug that was placed in her bathwater last night. Alone, Lutz looks at Hinael seriously and starts to tell her about the report he received from the other maids, stating that her bathwater from last night was dirty. Hearing this, Hinael starts to panic since Dea might be punished if Lutz knows that it's her. Thus, Hinael quickly apologizes to Lutz and explains to him that she also learned it this morning, and everything was a mistake made by her maid. Knowing this, Lutz tells Hinael that her maid must be punished, as he can't overlook this mistake, having almost been injured himself. Hinael starts to panic and begs Lutz to spare Dea this once, since it's all her fault and not her maid. Lutz then agrees to this, but tells Hinael that Dea needs to return to Salur. However, Hinael hadn't agreed to this, and she again begs Lutz, explaining that Dea is her only close friend ever since they were young. Listening to Hinael, Lutz starts to remember how alone he has felt his whole life. Thus, he decides to overlook this mistake just this once for Hinael's sake. Lutz is for sure already head over heels with Hinael. The next morning, while Hinael is preparing, she starts to think of a plan on how to get news from Salur. Thus, she then thinks of writing to her mother in May. As she writes, Hinael starts to question whether the events that happened to her in her past life are also beginning to occur to May, but realizes that there's no guarantee that they'll happen the same way. Later that night, the third prince's spy reports to him about everything that happened at Lutz's home, from Lutz's nightly visits to Hinael to Lutz's lack of signs of recovery and his non-critical condition. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Dea overheard the others talking about how Lutz truly adores Hinael, and how lucky Dea is not to have been punished even after the mistake she made. Listening to the music, Dea starts to feel more confident and even notices how kind and respectful the maids are to her. The maid then approached Dea and curiously asked her what kind of tea she was preparing for Hinael, to which Dea explained that this tea was only for royals and was hard to obtain. Afterwards, Dea arrives and sees Hinael lost in deep thoughts on how she can help Lutz minimize his loss when the time comes that he and the third prince fight for the throne, since in her past life she knows that the crown prince will die. Dea then slowly approached Hinael to get her attention and handed her the tea for her to relax. But Hinael didn't finish her tea. Instead, she proceeded to visit Lutz in his study room. Upon arriving outside Lutz's office, the butler announces to Hinael and Dea that only Hinael is permitted to enter, which they oblige. Inside the room, Hinael instantly sees Lutz busy with his paperwork. While Lutz also points out how Hinael is beautiful, she dresses for a typical day, making Hinael think that she is overly dressed. Thus, she quickly explains that she's making an effort to see him, but informs him that she'll change if Lutz displeases her. Still, Lutz quickly explains that he only means to say that she looks beautiful, making her a little flustered. Lutz approaches Hinael while asking her what the purpose of her visit is. Thus, Hinael informs him that she intends to learn riding a horse, while keeping to herself that her real intention is to gather information from the Imperial Palace, and also to interact with other people. Plus, Hinael also wants to prove to others that she's not only the woman who came from Salur that wears ridiculous dresses. Hearing this, Lutz agrees and informs her that he will be the one who will teach Hinael, surprising her and prompting her to look at Lutz questioningly, as she had thought that Lutz would only ask other people to teach her. Knowing this, Lutz stops and tries to think of an excuse. His main reason is that he doesn't like other guys being close to her while she's training. However, he can't think of any excuse, so he dismisses Hinael. Looks like someone is possessive. The next morning, Hinael and Lutz are in the riding grounds. Upon arriving, Hinael approaches the horse excitedly and begins to adore it. Afterwards, Lutz begins to teach Hinael the basics, and Hinael easily rides the horse. However, a few minutes later, Hinael accidentally tightens the horse's reins, causing the horse to move abruptly. Fortunately, the horse stops afterwards. Lutz then quickly helps Hinael get down from the horse and apologizes to Hinael for being so lazy in teaching, and also promises to ask someone more experienced in teaching. The following day, Hinael gets better from riding the horse with the help of a lady guard. As Hinael is riding the horse, she suggests to the lady guard that they walk in the forest. There, Hinael encounters the third prince, who is also riding his horse. Ugh, not this bastard again! Kyle then greets Hinael, and in return, Hinael also greets him. Kyle continues to talk to Hinael and shares with her that he can still clearly remember her in the dress she wore at the party. However, he tells her that she must not misunderstand him, as he thinks Hinael looks beautiful, which also leaves a lasting impression on her. Listening to Kyle, Hinael starts to remember what kind of person he was in her past life. Hinael knows that Kyle is the one who instigated the kidnapping of Heir, and also in the past, Kyle, the third prince, is the one who murdered the crown prince. But Kyle put all the blame on Lutz. Remembering this in mind, Hinael already knows that she must be on the lookout when around Kyle. Afterwards, Kyle invites Hinael to join him at the hunting grounds and shares with her how to teach her to hunt, which Hinael reluctantly agrees to, even when her lady guard tries to stop her. Oh, I don't trust this Kyle! Seeing the worried face of the lady guard, Hinael assured her that everything would be fine and shared that it might be a good opportunity for her also to develop an interest in hunting. After a few minutes of riding at the hunting grounds, there were no animals to hunt, so Kyle apologized to Hinael for bringing her alone and ended up with nothing to show or do. Hinael responded to Kyle that he didn't need to worry about it, since she also intended to talk to Kyle. Hearing this, Kyle asks Hinael what she wants to ask him. Hinael shares that she heard the crown prince is in critical condition, and Kyle might also be worried and stressed because of this. Knowing this, Kyle starts to act sad and comments that the crown prince's illness is so severe that even doctors are having a hard time curing the crown prince. Staring at Kyle for a minute, Hinael thinks that he might care for the crown prince, but stops since she knows that everything is an act. Afterwards, Lutz approaches them in a hurry and tells Kyle to stay away from his wife. But Kyle maniacally smirks at him and hits Hinael's horse, causing it to be distressed and making Hinael fall from it. Lutz hurriedly approaches Hinael and checks her for injuries, seeing minor wounds because of the fall. Lutz tries to chase Kyle but is stopped by Hinael. Seeing Hinael's worried face, Lutz assures her that he will not chase after Kyle, while also commenting on how surprised he is to know that Hinael doesn't want him to get hurt. Realizing her actions, Hinael quickly makes an excuse by explaining to Lutz that she was worried since they didn't have a child, and she would be alone if Lutz ever lost his life. Hearing this, Lutz angrily asks why Hinael is so obsessed with having a child, and questions whether someone might be forcing her to have one. Hinael quickly explains that since she was a child, it has always been her dream to have a child with whom she can shower her love and affection that she never received growing up. Knowing Hinael's reason, Lutz calms down and assures Hinael that he will work hard to give her a child, even if they have to do it every night. But for now, Hinael must rest because of her injury. Hinael then tries to offer to Lutz that they can still do it tonight, since she's not severely hurt, though Lutz quickly disapproves of this. Afterwards, in the room, Dea voices her worries upon seeing Hinael's wound and proceeds to help Hinael treat it. After treating it, Dea leaves Hinael to rest. But then a few minutes later, Lutz comes barging into Hinael's room. Hence, she curiously asks Lutz the purpose of their visit, since he specifically tells her that they'll not be doing it tonight. Lutz explains that he's only checking up on Hinael to ensure she's in good condition. He quickly tries to leave, but Hinael stops him by asking about the crown prince's health, and also voicing her concern that Lutz might be blamed if the crown prince dies. Lutz looks at Hinael curiously and questions her about what exactly she means by it, which she quickly explains that there's no hidden meaning by it, but only because after knowing about the declining health of the crown prince and the bad relationship Lutz has with Kyle, then maybe those things might happen. So Lutz tells her not to think about it since it is nothing that she's involved with and proceeds to leave Hinael. In the hallways, Lutz then calls Evan and instructs him to gather updates about the Crown Prince and the people visiting him, as Hinael's concerns are valid, given that Kyle is also ruthless and will do anything to gain the crown and the Emperor's favor. Afterwards, Evan curiously asked Lutz if he also planned to save the Crown Prince, in case Kyle was plotting something to kill him. Hearing this, Lutz then mischievously smirks at him and replies that he will do no such thing, since the two princes killing each other will be favorable because he also plans to kill them if they try to attack him too. Later that night, Lutz quietly visits Hinael in her room and starts staring at her sleeping face for a few minutes. And seeing how peaceful she is, Lutz promises himself to protect and never let anyone take her, even if he dies. Ugh, to have a man like Lutz! In the morning, Lutz assists Hinael in riding the horse, and Lutz is a little flirty with Hinael, not minding the stares of other people at them. As they rode together, Hinael said something that surprised Lutz, causing him to pull the reins of the horse a little, which made the horse jump. However, Lutz quickly calmed it down. Having teased him greatly, Hinael laughed at Lutz, since this was the first time she had seen him flustered. Hinael quickly moves away after noticing that Lutz is about to kiss her, since she's embarrassed by other people staring at them. Hearing this, Lutz quickly carries Hinael and brings her to their room. At the same time, Evan is staring at them like a person who is anti-romantic. Afterwards, Lutz and Hinael continue their steamy act with intimacy with each other. It's like they can't be away from each other. Later on, after that hot activity, Hinael then tells Lutz not to talk about him dying and leaving her with their successor, since it's as if Lutz is already talking about his death, which he only nods at. Next, while Lutz stares at a sleeping Hinael, he promises himself that he'll do everything she wants, even if it means being the Emperor. A few days later, while Hinael is having tea, Evan visits her and informs her that Lutz wants to see her in his office immediately, as the Empress Dowager wishes to have a meeting with Hinael. Knowing this, Hinael quickly visits Lutz, and upon arriving, Lutz then gives Hinael a gift, a coat made up of silver fox fur. Hinael is amazed at how pretty it is. Even Dea beside her is also adoring the coat. Still admiring the beautiful coat, Lutz also points out the other gift that is for Hinael. Seeing the other beautiful gift, Hinael is shocked to see the expensive items made for her. Hinael then looks at Lutz and thanks him for all the presents she received. But Lutz informs her that he's still not finished since they still need to see his last gift for her, which is outside. Upon arriving outside, Hinael quickly approaches the gorgeous horse and starts to admire it. Lutz suggests that Hinael ride her horse, and seeing that she's reluctant because of what she's wearing, he assures her that it's fine, it'll only be for a short ride. Thus, Hinael agrees to it. After a while, Hinael looks at Lutz warmly and sincerely thanks him for everything he has given her. Hearing this, Lutz then replies that he promises to give her everything she wants and she deserves, while also moving in for a kiss. Afterwards, Hinael proceeds to her room and is excited to see a letter from her mother, May, and Phil. She then proceeds to read their letter and starts to miss them. Hinael also learns that Heir is treating May kindly, which is good news, and she is also aware of Phil's worsened injury. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!